Growing up in the 90s, while perusing the video store, you were bound to find two things that stuck out: Faces of Death and Traces of Death. Sometimes hidden in the back room with the porn, but most of the time out in the open in the horror section, showing how little the clerks knew or cared about what they were renting out. To this day, people debate over what was real and what was fake in Faces of Death, even though it has all been made perfectly clear thousands of times. And then some know-it-all guy will always pipe in and say, Faces is for pussies, Traces of Death is 100% real and the real extreme film series. What if I told you that not only is Traces of Death not 100% all real footage, but that they even stole many fake scenes from the Faces of Death series, and that all of the other footage they didn't steal from Faces was stolen or previously used in countless other projects before Traces even existed?
First of all, I don't give a fuck what you think about me. I don't give a fuck about what you think about my movies. I don't. If you don't like them, then don't watch them.
And no, this is not going to be a video bashing Traces of Death. I'm just here to clear up all the misleadings that people ignore and continue to regurgitate to this day. But I have to try. I will say though, Traces of Death did not make death compilations first, but they probably did it best. From a marketing point of view, anyway. I'm your host, fucking.
Welcome, Gorehounds. This is Brain Damage welcoming you to
Faces of Death Metal. A guide to Traces of Death. Another very special episode of the shit show I like to call Everybody Dies. And I know, before you give me shit about the title, listen, I didn't want to say Traces of Death twice in the title. And what is Traces of Death but not Faces of Death plus death metal? I mean, they called it Traces because it was so similar to Faces, so in dedication, homage, but to also get people to possibly rent their film by mistake, so the title stays. This video will cover the Traces of Death series broken down by the creation, the creators, the footage used, the many releases in the States and worldwide, and most importantly, the soundtracks. The films we will be covering are Traces of Death from 1993, Traces of Death 2 from 1994, Traces of Death 3 from 1995, Traces of Death 4 from 1996, Traces of Death 5 from 2000, and Traces of Death Special, also from 2000. The versions I will be covering are the original VHS releases as well as the 9th anniversary VHS and DVD box sets. I will go in depth on some foreign releases and their differences near the end of the video. First, I want to give credit to the creators of some of the best shockumentary artwork ever made, and some of the worst. The original VHS cover art is Part 1 by Innovative Imaging, Part 2 from J. Flynn IV, Parts 3 and 4 from John Watson, and Part 5 from Michael Segers, if that's how you pronounce it. The remastered box set artwork is credited to Girl Collective. I don't know why. Girls? Ew. What did they do? Add the shitty silver bar? But more about the different releases later on. Let's take a look at the creators of Traces of Death. Fair warning, as usual with these kinds of things, information varies all over the internet and contacting anyone who can confirm or deny anything is impossible, so take everything in this video with a grain of salt. Also, good luck looking up anything about the two companies I'm about to discuss, as you'll mostly get results about these two movies.
My first company that I had created was actually called Dead Alive Productions. And I had actually, but believe it or not, I actually created that before the film, Peter Jackson film, Dead Alive, was released here in North America.
Dead Alive Productions out of Mesa, Arizona ran from approximately 1993 to 2003. They and their parent company, Spectrum Films, distributed everything from no-budget horror to low-budget horror to big-budget foreign horror like Men Behind the Sun. They also acquired and redistributed many other shockumentaries like Faces of Death 2000, Shocking Menu, Execution, etc. But they would team up with Fox Industries and become best known for their own creation, Traces of Death. Damon Fox was born Bill Rocks Jr. on May 17, 1966 in Phoenix, Arizona, possibly. Damon is very aloof and it's hard to find any solid information on him, past or present. Most info found online is incorrect as people often mistake him for Damon Fox of The Cult, whose birth name is Damon Fox. Here's what we do know about our Damon. Son of well-known film critic William R. Bill Rocks, who was born July 10, 1935 and died June 25, 1996 at age 60. You can visit Bill Sr.'s grave at Green Acres Memorial Park in Scottsdale, Maricopa County, Arizona. Vocalist of power metal band Stormtrooper in 1983 under the alias Damian Black.
Better watch out! Better run for your life! They're coming, marching through! Screaming for vengeance, the adjustable pillars! The armies of the night out to you!
Founder of Fox Entertainment Enterprises, not that Fox, probably why there are two X's. Fox also co-produced the first two Traces films in which Damon was also writer-narrator. Damon also released Catalog of Carnage magazine, selling Traces and Ed Gein merch, real-life human skulls, and more weird shit.
Newspapers, books, and magazines around the world. The Catalog of Carnage is packed with the most incredible items you've ever seen. Real human skulls, human bones, trading cards, model kits, jewelry, serial killers, soundtracks, statues, and more. Thousands of amazing items, including your chance to own the official Coroner's Camera video, t-shirt, and CD soundtrack. Plus the biggest selection of the best and bloodiest uncut videos at the best prices anywhere. For your giant full-size catalog, send $5, $10 outside the U.S. to Fox Entertainment Enterprises Limited, 327 West Laguna, Tempe, Arizona, 85282. The biggest horror catalog in the world.
Damon was shown to be the creator of the Ed Gein fan club in another rare appearance in the 1997 documentary Clive Barker's A to Z of Horror.
With the fan club, we started just with a shirt. It became a very big seller. We have a lot of people writing in as far as any kind of additional merchandise. Well, we saw there was such a mass appeal for Ed Gein that we formed the official International Ed Gein Fan Club, which was, I admit, it sounds really funny to hear the Ed Gein Fan Club, but it's more of an appreciation society for the man who influenced numerous horror movies, classic horror movies, and some that are considered among the best today. We get letters written in broken English. I be a big fan of Ed Gein for many years. Please send me, information. How to may I join? The interesting thing is this, the controversy that it has caused. We have so many newspapers and things that have been wanting to do articles on the fan club that we've been doing because it's so sick. But it's so much fun, and you got to take this with a grain of salt.
1997 also saw Damon write, direct, and host his own shockumentary under Fox Entertainment, The Coroner's Camera.
Welcome. I'm Damon Fox. Real death movies, shockumentaries, Mondo movies have grown quite a bit in popularity over the last several years. Seems like you can't go into a video store nowadays without seeing a new one on the shelf. And a couple of them are actually even pretty good. But we have something very special for you here. For the first time, we have actual footage taken directly from the cameras of coroners, pathologists, and medical examiners from around the country, right as their unlucky victims are brought in on the slab. You ever watch the evening news and see the stories on the intense plane crashes, car wrecks, murders, suicides? But they never show you anything. They never show you the good stuff. Well, we're going to show you the good stuff. Big time. And you want to see it, too. That's why when there's a car wreck, there's always a long line of cars. If there's no blood, they drive off. If there's carnage, they stay to watch. Well, get ready to watch. So turn up the volume, turn down the lights, and get ready for an incredible journey which few people will ever have the chance to see. For an extreme and intense journey through the lens of the coroner's camera.
He composed the soundtrack for that film as well. God bless that goddamn hair. The real brains of Traces of Death, though, belong to co-creator Darren Gene Ramage, born in August 1971, also known as brain damage due to excessive LSD use in his youth. Founder of Brain Damage Films after leaving Dead Alive, which ran from October 2001 to November 2024, according to Darren's LinkedIn page. His many other sublabels and projects still live on. Also, according to LinkedIn, strange but true, at one point this guy worked for Google. Here's Darren on why he left Dead Alive and formed Brain Damage Films.
First company was Dead Alive Productions, and I had partners. And, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world, given the time. But after 8 years, it was a nasty divorce. $500,000. I mean, it was very expensive lawsuits. My ex-partners tried to make claim that the Traces of Death series was theirs.
Oh, man.
And so, I mean, it just lawsuits and lots of money. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, I've had to fight, battle, to keep the series alive. And not just that series, but other films that, it produced and so forth. So they kept the name of the company, which I was pushing for. But at the time, I was pushing for, Dead Alive Productions. But they wanted that. They kept that, which was fine because they'd already basically destroyed to the industry, the production and producer, filmmaker industry. They pretty much screwed the name over by screwing so many of these filmmakers over. Not paying royalties, not producing their royalty reports, things like that. So, I just said, I want my movies back because they're mine. They're my babies. So I want my movies back. So when I sat down to do my new label, I said, well, what am I going to call my new label? I had Dead Alive Productions, but I didn't own the name anymore, so I couldn't use Dead Alive Productions. I sat down and started really, really thinking about it. And I go, one of the big things that is going to happen to this label in the next, year or so will be the re-release of the Traces of Death series on DVD. So, that's Brain Damage. Let's bring character in, Like, you know what? Brain Damage Films. Because that's the reason that this label is even existing is because of Brain Damage with the Traces of Death series. So let's just call it Brain Damage Films.
Brain Damage Films re-released Traces 1 through 5 for its 9-year anniversary and was also known for distributing many low-budget horror films like Dead Alive did. They even produced indie horror films, including more Brad Sykes films like Death Factory and Goth. Brain Damage Films also helped keep the shockumentary alive by acquiring films from many defunct companies. Thanks to Brain Damage, films like Impact 911, Snuff Video, the Paramedics Trilogy, the Faces of Death 2000 series, the Band in America series, and more saw brand new DVD releases. Unlike Damon, Darren was much more willing to be the face of his company, taking over Traces of Death as the narrator in Part 3. Darren also appeared on camera for the remaining sequels and did interviews for the 9-year anniversary box set. He also did trailers and intros for movies that Brain Damage Films distributed.
Welcome again, Gorehounds, to another twisted tale in the Brain Damage Files. The legend of Quiltface is true. Turn down the lights. Crank up the volume. This is pure carnage. The legend of Quiltface.
Now for a bit about the relationship of Mr. and Mrs. Traces from Darren himself when he was a guest on the podcast Uneasy Terrain Explorers Club. I'm going to use a lot of audio from that interview because he has not done many interviews that are available online.
I can't remember exactly how I got in contact with Damon Fox initially. Off the top of my head, I can't. Of course, that's why they call me Brain Damage. But I can't remember how we first met. But we had a good friendship, and a strong kinship. We were, going through, and he had a bunch of footage. I had a bunch of footage, so we just kind of put it together and said, I think we can do something with this. He did the voiceover on, I think he did part 1 and part 2. A little more campy than is my flavor, which is why 3, 4, and 5 don't have that kind of a voiceover narrative dialogue to them, because I'm not big into campy kind of stuff. I don't like really campy horror films. I'm into the more extreme and real. That's just my, it's what I prefer to have, what I prefer to watch. So, like I said, I can't remember exactly how we got in contact, but me and her, when we put the first one together, it was a match. Well, one of the things that happened while we were in production of part 2, I had gotten some people who had gotten in touch with me, who were actually some of the camera guys that actually shot some of the footage.
Oh, wow.
That we used. And they were pumped. They thought it was great. They thought it was exciting and everything else. But they were a little bummed, if you will, I guess. They were just a little bummed that they didn't get any credit for it. And not necessarily that they wanted credit, their name involved with it, because of the kind of footage that we're talking about. A lot of people don't want their names associated with it. But just simply, as crazy as it sounds, just simply a thank you. And come to find out that the footage that was, had been kind of trampled on, if you will, had not been acquired properly, or been given at least the verbal okay. That's the way I do business. It's public domain footage. So do you have to ask somebody for permission? No. Do you have to, anything like that? No, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. It's just, that's the way I do business. I'm not going to use something that isn't mine unless I ask. So I did. And didn't have a problem with it. And so it was the reason why, right in the middle of Traces of Death part 2, during the production of it, that we decided to part ways. So we finished off part 2, and then that was it. Because Damon just didn't really feel like that was necessary to do. So I did. So that's when I brought the character Brain Damage back, put him on screen, and had him do a little dialogue and give thanks to these guys for being out there and shooting this kind of footage and having this kind of footage. They make their money just fine, because they sell that footage to the news channels. Mm-hmm. The news channels cannot show all of the footage, though, obviously, because it's on broadcast television. So, they can just show little bits and pieces of it. They can't show the heavy, hardcore gore of it, but I can. And so, we had a little bit of a difference there. It was really kind of cool, because we kind of parted ways. And there was, not a whole lot of love between us, if you will. Mm-hmm. But then about, I want to say it was probably 15 years ago now, or 15 years. There was a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors in Pasadena, California, and we were exhibiting. Brain Image Films was exhibiting and promoting our new releases and Traces of Death and everything else. And Damon Fox was there, and I got to sit down with him, have a couple of drinks with him, and we just, kind of, cleared any bad air that there was between us. It was really, really cool.
I reached out to the only person I know that has any connection to Dead Alive Productions and Brain Damage Films, and that is director Brad Sykes. I just wanted a couple words from him if he had the time and didn't mind. He has nothing to do with Traces of Death, but working with both companies and working directly with Darren, he's the only direct connection that I have with any, actual information. And I just needed a few things cleared up, and he took the time to write this entire article just for my video, so thank you, Brad, I appreciate it. This is titled, My Time with Dead Alive and Brain Damage Films. I first became aware of Dead Alive home video during film school when I rented their VHS release of Meet the Feebles. I was a big Peter Jackson fan. Bad Taste was one of the movies that made me want to become a filmmaker. So I was thrilled to see his second film out on video. I also watched The Burning Moon, another Dead Alive title around this time. So I related the company name with edgy, unusual horror films. I became much more familiar with Dead Alive in 2000 when their parent company, Spectrum Films, handled foreign sales for my third professional movie, Camp Blood. They also released it on video in the US. Spectrum Films had 3 labels. Spectrum would release the biggest movies, Dead Alive was a tier under that and only did horror, and they had a third label, Burning Moon Home Video, wonder where they got that name, that put out the lowest budget horror films. Burning Moon was the label they used to put out Camp Blood in spring 2000. Camp Blood did so well both domestically and overseas that Spectrum wanted a sequel, and they wanted it yesterday. They funded Camp Blood 2 themselves and released it on their biggest label, Spectrum Films, in the fall of 2000. It was my first movie to get a really big video release in the US. It was in Hollywood Video, Movie Gallery, etc. Spectrum was based in Mesa, Arizona, and the producer of Camp Blood and I visited them in 2000 to meet everyone and promote the film. That was one of the first times I met Darren Ramage, who was one of their main sales execs and had a real passion for horror movies. A few years later, in 2001 or 2002, Spectrum had some financial problems and started to go under. Darren split off from them and started his own company, Brain Damage Films. I did a lot of business with him for a few years. BDF released my movies The Coven and Zombie Chronicles in the US and overseas, and more importantly, produced 2 movies I wrote and directed, Death Factory and Goth. Darren was a great salesman and promoter, though many filmmakers complained about not getting paid, etc., and got my films in Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, etc. Not to mention major overseas releases all over the world, cable, etc. I was a guest of BDF at a Fangoria Con in 2002 where he had a huge room for the entire weekend. Darren was a big believer in Goth and pushed it through even if the delegated producer hated the movie and tried to sabotage it. Goth went on to be a major cult film and inspire artists in many mediums from film to music to comic book art. The years with Spectrum and Brain Damage were a hectic whirlwind of a time for me professionally, sometimes stressful and demanding, but also gratifying as, unlike other distributors I worked with, Spectrum and BDF always pushed the movies and got them in front of audiences and critics. No one did more than those 2 companies in terms of getting shot-on-video movies into the mainstream. As a result, some of the movies I made during that time that were produced or released by Dead Alive or BDF, like Camp Blood and Goth, are still some of my best-known films over 20 years later. Thanks again to Brad Sykes for taking time out of his busy schedule to write this for me and make this video just that much better. And a minor spoiler, but I may be doing a video retrospective on Brad Sykes' filmography one day. But I have a lot of stuff to do before that. Now for my thoughts on the Traces of Death series itself. I honestly think it was only popular back in the day because of the soundtrack. It's just one of those things where young kids got together, dared themselves to watch it. But honestly, after a couple minutes, they probably would have turned it off. But the soundtrack made it to where it was something you could have on in the background as you're partying with a big group of people, and just occasionally you can look over at it and go, and whatever. But just without the music and a lot of these other shockumentaries, that's the problem with that, is if you're just going to sit and try to watch them with your full attention, you're going to get bored after a couple minutes. I mean, even as I'm researching these and going through them and back and forth and seeing the same clips over and over again, I realize that a lot of these I have not sat down and just watched all the way through. Traces makes it a lot easier because of the soundtrack. And I think it's that kind of marketing and whatever that was genius by Darren, and that's what kind of made Traces last. Because they not only used the music, but they got record companies involved and made deals with them so it was fully legit. Also, the footage is all quick snippets with music over them. The most interesting part of shockumentary footage to me is the context. Traces loses the context, the build-up, the aftermath, leaving only small bits that aren't enough to leave the impact it thinks it does. Brain Damage thinks differently.
The Traces of Death brings the death films into the MTV style generation because it is quick, it's fast-paced, fast cuts. There are usually over 100 scenes, different scenes of death in each of the episodes, parts 1 through 5. So they're very quick and they're very fast-paced. And then, you know, the addition of the music in parts 2, 3, 4, and 5. You know, it just brings the whole death right to the blood, the guts, quick, fast-paced, in your face.
And yet there are some shots that go on for 5 to 15 minutes just to fill the runtime, going against his statement. The first film is the worst offender of this. To be fair, once Darren completely took over, Traces got better. Well, until part 5, but more on that later. Now for some censorship about the series, taken from Wikipedia. In 1997, Amy Hochberg, a woman living in Coaldale, Pennsylvania, rented the film from a video store and was so disgusted by the film's content that she considered keeping the tape to prevent children from procuring it from the store. She also contacted multiple animal rights groups after witnessing a scene in the film wherein a pig is experimented on with a blowtorch. She also lodged a complaint with the video store she had rented it from, as she thought the film was simply 911 calls with a little more. Sounds like Amy needs to get a fucking life. June 21st, 2005, the BBFC deemed Traces of Death unsuitable for classification, effectively banning it. The BBFC stated that the film had no journalistic, educational, or other justifying context for the images shown, which, to their point, is exactly what the producers were going for. Sounds like Britain needs to get a fucking life. In Germany, the anniversary DVD box set was indexed by their version of the MPAA, the Federal Review Board for Media Harmful to Young Persons. Suggested on January 13, 2020, decided on April 20, 2021, and made official on May 28, 2021. Sounds like Germany needs to get a fucking life. In Australia, I found one online report from August 2003 stating that a copy of Traces of the Death Anniversary DVD box set was seized by customs for being forfeited goods, which include goods that are smuggled, unlawfully imported, exported, or conveyed as per Custom Acts 1901, Section 229. Sounds like Australia needs to get a fucking life. A copy of the November 7, 1994 New Zealand Register of Classification decisions for the first film is available online. Nothing is stated to be censored or altered, they just flat out classified it as objectionable. More interesting, though, is the fact that they have Inhumanities 3 listed as an alternate title. There's no other evidence of the film being released under this title, so it's a really odd inclusion. Also, it sounds like New Zealand needs to get a fucking life. Before I break down every film, I would like to give a special thank you to the YouTube channel Senior Onions Archives for doing the devil's work and having all of the YouTube allowed scenes broken up with background info. I'm only summarizing the footage with some info here and there. If you want more details, check out his channel. Now, Darren claims that all of the footage they used is either public domain or stock footage, and it's all legal to use. Now, that might be true, but a lot of it is pulled directly from other Mondo and shockumentary films. Like, maybe they got the rights to use the footage from those movies. It just seems weird that it's not pulled from the sources that those movies also got that same footage from. It's pulled directly from the films themselves because it still has the same editing, the same music, all of that. So I'm going to point those out. I'm not going to point out every single scene. There is a lot of footage from Japanese shockumentaries that most people probably haven't seen in the States and whatever. But I'm going to point most of them out. Now, this is a long fucking video, so don't go through and be like, oh, Dave, you missed this scene from this obscure Mondo that nobody's ever seen and doesn't care about. So get the fuck over it. No one's watching this anyway. I'm also going to point out some scenes that are obviously fake. Now, I'm not going to post an article or anything that proves that these are fake, but once you've seen enough of the real stuff, the fake stuff really sticks out. Even as you're watching this video, you're probably going to notice some shit. So don't be surprised. But once again, I'm not doing this to bash on Traces of Death. It's just their marketing was so hardcore and still have people brainwashed today believing that Traces is 100% real. And yeah, a lot of it is, but oh my god, there is so much fake stuff that most people to this day still don't even realize. So, let's finally begin Traces of Death, Part 1.